Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to our webinar today. So we've got a really great topic up for you all of thinking in 3D that we're going to go through over the next 45 minutes or so. So I'm Rachel Cotardia, the Marketing Director here at Redeye, and I'm joined by my special guest, Andy Hanselman, who I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. But I'm essentially going to moderate the webinar for you today, and I'll let Andy go through his great concept and bring some of these fantastic examples to life as well. So just to remind people, if you do actually have a question while we're going through that comes to mind, feel free to submit that and we'll try to cover as many of them as we can as we go through, or we'll cover them at the end. So I think you have a question mark icon on the right hand side of your panel, and that's where you should be able to submit your questions. So also then I suppose, why are Redeye covering this topic today? Well, at Redeye, the aim for us is to help marketers and the brands that they work for be the most successful that they can be, which is why then we've teamed up with Andy to get him to share his proven technique of thinking in 3D, which essentially is how brands can sort of stand out and differentiate themselves. And with, you know, the really high competition and everything else that's going on at the moment, it's really more important than ever to really think about, you know, standing out through your sort of strategy. But then I suppose, you know, before we go any further, Andy, would you like to briefly introduce yourself to people listening today?
I certainly will. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Andy Hanselman. I was conscious people ask this question, who the heck is he? I like to get the bad news out of the way straight away. I'm a management consultant, but I help businesses, their leaders, their people think in 3D. It's all about being dramatically and demonstrably different. I speak at conferences and events with a real mix of businesses, and I put this up for no other reason to say I'm no expert in one particular sector. We see often the challenges that people have range in a real mix of businesses. I'm actually based in Sheffield, but work all over the place. And this thing about being dramatically and demonstrably different, people say, well, what's it all about? Well, I think we are in a dramatically and demonstrably different world. The world is moving very, very quickly. It's a world where the way we communicate and engage is changing massively. I read this recently. If you took the value of all these car companies, they come to $654 billion, which is a serious amount of money. If you were to take the value of Tesla on its own, it exceeds that. Not right or wrong, I just argue evidence from a dramatically and demonstrably different world. Apple announced earlier this year they sold more Apple iWatches last year than the whole of the Swiss watchmaking industry put together. And just to show you maybe how quickly this world is moving, if you look at this song, Painted Love by Soft Cell, that was actually #1 nearer the end of World War II than today. I recognise younger people might not have heard the song, but that's to sort of show you the fast pace that we're actually moving at the moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that introduction, Andy. I had actually heard of that song, I have, but yeah, that's really the concept, like I said, of moving fast, I think is, you know, visible to everyone off the back of the pandemic. What were those references that we all heard of, you know, 7 years of transformation in 7 months, or, you know, there's the different variations of that, but I think that's just really setting the pace for the future. But you know, I suppose if we then look about what we're up against today, you know, in the current landscape, so, you know, unless people haven't been listening to the news over the past few months, you know, everyone's going to be familiar with the doom and the gloom that's been sort of reported on. So you've got inflation soaring, the cost of living crisis hitting everybody, recession is looming, and, you know, what doesn't help is those international pressures as well. We've got, you know, maybe stock disruptions coming from China, the war in Ukraine. Oh, it's all so depressing. But, you know, unfortunately, what we've all got to think of is this isn't going away overnight either. You know, all these things are impacting the consumer's pockets and the changing habits, and that's all quickly, as what we've just said. You know, we're consumers ourselves. You know, we know that there might be things that we're changing or planning to do differently in the coming months. So, you know, really the big question I think for us to address today then is obviously how brands and marketers can then sort of, you know, reach and engage those consumers and protect, or sort of, let's say, enhance their sales. You know, and that's what we're really going to go into more detail around today, but not necessarily the short-term fix, but actually, you know, how you can really sort of rethink your sort of, you know, your marketing approach, or, like I said, your strategy, and sort of then be prepared for these sort of rapidly changing behaviours. And before we get into that, it's probably actually, you know, worthwhile, sorry, I said stripping it back and and looking what actually is marketing?
Okay, great question. I like to use this question to get people to start thinking about it, because I was coming to such an esteemed audience. I thought I'd get my old MBA notes out to have a look, and I found this, which I've absolutely no idea what that means. So the definition that we use, and this is something that I would encourage people to really think about, is that when we talk about marketing, we talk about finding, attracting, and keeping the customers that you want while maximizing your profits. Some key things here: finding them, getting them to come to you, and then getting them to come back, keeping them. And it's clearly the customers that you want, and it makes commercial sense. And the reason I emphasize that is that by definition, it means that everybody in your business, when we start looking at 3D businesses, everybody recognizes the value they pay in actually keeping customers, getting them to come back. This could even be revolutionary stuff. The marketing department is one thing, the accounts department is another. They're the last contact people have very often with a business. They give a poor experience, people don't come back. So finding, attracting, keeping the customers that you want while maximizing your profits is what this is all about.
Yeah, and I think if I just, unpick that, I suppose from my perspective, today retention is king. Retention is the new acquisition. So yes, obviously, as part of marketing is finding and acquiring those new customers, but in today's landscape, price of acquisition is just absolutely soaring. So it's vital that you plow that time, effort, and resources into retention more than you ever have done before, I would say. But that's not so easy. As we highlighted earlier, we've obviously got some of the macro trends that are affecting businesses, so the cost of living crisis, etc. But I think what's probably good as well then is to highlight some of the marketing challenges that we know obviously businesses are facing when it's coming to making their marketing work. And I know this is one of the questions that we actually asked our listeners to submit in advance, what their challenges were. So Andy, it'd be great if you can sort of, run through sort of those and then compare them really to what you're sort of seeing in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks very much to those people that did send a quick reply telling us the challenges. It might be no consolation to you, but the things you talked about were very, very similar to what we see in businesses all over the place. And there are sort of 5 key challenges that we tend to group them into. And just again, see if you sort of recognize any of these. The first one is what I call the age of abundance. People just talk about more and more competition. And I think it's also worth pointing out that competition is much easier to find these days. Simple example, last night, I just Googled men's retailers near me, and nearly 1.5 billion entries came up. Now, clearly, there are not 1.5 billion men's retailers near us, but there's lots of information, and it's at the touch of a button. So your competition is easy to be discovered by your customers if they're not happy with what you're doing. We're also in a very, very transparent world. Again, most people will be aware of this, but people do research before they do shopping. People do take into account customer reviews, what people are saying. And it's also worth pointing out that, I'm sure you use TripAdvisor. I'm yet to go on the website of a hotel that says we offer a fantastic customer experience, apart from Tuesdays and Thursdays when Kevin, the manager, isn't in. People are bound to say great stuff about their business. It's what others are saying. And this reaches in all sorts of areas. I'm sure you're not familiar with this one. Silk Road, it's on the dark web. Somebody's told me that it's not available at the moment, but I don't know. And apparently that's like an eBay for drug dealers, where you can actually rate the quality of your drug dealer, the quality service, this is what you're getting. Maybe something not quite as deep and dark is petrolprices.com. Type in your postcode, tell you the price of petrol, the next square miles of where you live, and keep it updated with it. Again, that's not for everybody. My father-in-law loves that. He drives miles. And the point with this stuff is that do we actually know what people are saying about us out there? It's a very transparent world. The research also suggests that we don't believe the hype. As consumers, we question and challenge a lot more now. 3/4 don't believe cognitive truth advertisements. When I was a kid, we honestly believed that for MASH, you had to get smash. It's what you did. Whereas now we question and challenge it. The ones that really wind me up, I don't know if you've seen them, where sort of 98% of our customers said they approve this product, particularly for women's cosmetics. You see a lot of it. There's an asterisk, sample size 114, and you realise that actually anybody can play this game. I've got a 100% rating. Okay, sample size only 3 people, but we can all say these things. The fourth one is that customer expectations are getting higher. And again, I'm sure there are people out there now telling us that their customers' expectations are getting higher, but the ideas, I'm just maybe put it out to see what people think. What percentage of customers do you think have higher expectations than they have they had a year ago. I think this was surveyed about a month ago, this survey came out. So a year and a month ago, what percentage of customers had higher expectations, you think, than a year ago?
Yeah, and this is actually where we're all going to get you involved in a little poll, actually. Just pop this on screen for you. So it should come up now. But yeah, so, as Andy just said, a challenge for us marketers, we have, we know that customer expectations are on the rise, but by how much? So, what percentage of customers have higher expectations than they had a year ago? So if you just pop whatever answer comes to mind, whether you think it's 0 to 20, whether you think it's 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, or more than 80% of customers' expectations have changed. So I'll just give you another moment to answer that. I can see there's a few people's answers are coming through. All right, okay, we'll close that now. And then let's see what everybody thought. Wow, okay, there's two close answers there, Andy.
I can't see those, but could you tell me what they say, please, Rachel, just so I can see what people said.
So we've got the 40 to 60 and the 60 to 80%, both have the highest percentages.
Okay, well, very interestingly, it's 56% who've actually got this higher one, which I think is quite interesting. If you've got younger customers, then it's even greater. So customer expectations are getting higher. It's also worth pointing out that when I talk to business leaders, they all say, customers have higher expectations than 5 years ago. But we talked about marketing being focusing on the customers you want to work with, that you want to attract. There are some customers, no matter what you do, you will never actually meet their expectations. These are genuine quotes from people who've been on Thomas Cook holidays. Try and look after these customers. The beach was too sandy. Nobody told us we're fish in the sea, our children were startled. It's quite scary stuff. The next one is not coming up. I think you should explain in the brochure that local store does not sell proper biscuits like custard creams or ginger nuts. And the final one, it's lazy of local shopkeepers to close in the afternoon. They often want to buy things in excess of time. It should be banned. There are some customers, no matter what you do, you will never actually deal with them. So are they the right customers for you? And linking to that is that they want things when they want them, how they want them. Many years ago, I remember coming home to watch the favourite TV programme in the world, the best one in the world, Blue Peter, walked in, and my mum was watching television. And in my day, mums didn't watch television during children's hour. And there were all these chaps talking about things. I know what was going on. It was the budget. We only got 3 channels. The budget on all 3 channels. I missed Blue Peter that particular day. Traumatic for me as an 11-year-old. Whereas today, I can watch it anywhere on iPlayer. I can be anywhere in the world and have the times on my iPad delivered to me. I can listen to tracks as I see fit. When I want to get food delivered to all over the place, I can, with one sweep, actually get the love of my life appearing. It's a world we're now in where people want things quicker, faster, more effectively. For example, I don't know if you know, see what you've into this one, Rachel. How long is the average time the UK consumers prepared to queue? This is the average. This is in the UK. This was again done earlier this year. But what do you reckon the average time the UK consumers prepared to queue?
Well, it's probably less than an hour unless you're queuing for the latest Apple iPhone or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely less than an hour. But the average is 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Wow. Okay.
Compared to 5 minutes 6 years ago. Now, you might be one of those customers quite happy to hang around, and lots are, but many customers in, out, aren't bothered. And it's the same online. Ever gone off a website, you find what you wanted, just gone everywhere, gone elsewhere very quickly. And we just walk away. And that's what customers do. However, part of this, there is an opportunity. And the research suggests that word of mouth is on the increase, as is word of mouse. We spread news very quickly. 93% of us actually see word of mouth as being a valuable source of referrals, up 26% compared to 25 years ago. And people talk about these things, which is great. But it's also worth pointing out they talk about the bad things too. And basically, when we start looking at this, people talk about brilliant stuff, lots of good stuff, lots of brilliant stuff we want to talk about. But when you start looking at these things, you start to realize that people are very vocal on socials to tell people. This is a guy spent £65,000 on a Range Rover from Lookers in Cheltenham, Essex, went to get it serviced, had a problem with it, complained, they did nothing about it, so he turned up outside their dealership. with that on the side of his car. It went local, went national, went viral. Apparently they're known locally as the Range Rover dealers. And what you start to realise is that people will talk about this stuff, good and bad. Hopefully it's the good stuff that we're talking about here. What does it all mean? Well, I'd argue that what you've got to do is do things that actually make your business stand out. You've got to do things that actually get people talking. And you mentioned it earlier, but coming back and coming back for more. That's what this whole idea of thinking in 3D is all about.
Okay, sounds simple, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, I think let's just recap on some of those things that you've covered there, because it was quite a lot. And I think, let's look at the challenges then you talked about. So, marketers are dealing with this age of abundance. Like I said, what you said, everybody and all your competitors are simply a click away. Competition in the digital world now is the fiercest that it's ever been. The customers then, you said, secondly, want greater transparency. So, reviews have a huge influence on customer decisions. And it's also not just the new customers as well. Even your existing and loyal customers, they might, look at reviews for other products and services you may offer. So, whatever platform you use, Trustpilot, FIFO, whatever it might be, having that review collection campaign, I think is an absolute must. They don't believe the hype, which you talked about thirdly, and people trust people, so it just hammers home that point before. The fourth one is a really interesting one, that you said expectations are higher, and you talked about, finding the right customer to nurture, just sort of not everyone. And I think this is something that we talk about at Red Eye in terms of your customers and understanding your different segments and personas that you may have, and making sure that you're actually giving the most value to the ones that also give you the most value back. And then that final one, they want it their way. So people want it quicker, faster, slicker, and and sometimes people can just focus on that on-site conversion for that. But look at it from email to purchase, SMS to purchase. Think about one-click purchase. How can you make it slicker and faster? Because nowadays people are just moving so fast in their day-to-day lives. But you did say there's an opportunity. How do we then look at that and get people coming back to us? So I think in terms of them, when people think about being different and standing out, people think about, well, we've got a USP, so a unique selling point or proposition. That's a well-known term. But Andy, you actually have a different take on that, don't you?
I do. I mean, I speak at confident events and I ask people this question: why should I buy from you? And I get people to write down some words and phrases. Not necessarily write them down, but if I was to ask you, the audience now, why should I buy from you? What words and phrases would you use in terms of why customers should come to you? And, I suspect you're going to say some of these similar things. These are some of the things that people regularly tell us are the reasons people come to them. And I would argue that they're all very valid reasons that people will use to get people to come to them. But one of the things when we start looking at this is that we actually find that, yes, people say they're USPs, but USP stands, when I use about this stuff, I think USP stands for the usual stuff people say. So I'll stress again, I'm not saying anything anybody said is wrong, but it's not what you say, it's what you do. So yes, we're going to say great stuff in our marketing materials, of course we are. It's what we do, and it's also what our people do. Does everybody in our business understand what our dramatic difference is and the role they play in doing it? And that to me is the essential what this thing is about, why everybody is involved in marketing. Very simple example, a client of mine, she was telling me a story. She went down to London for a 3-day HR conference, HR director of a business in Leeds. Arrived at King's Cross, got to go in a taxi, suddenly realised she'd lost her purse. Thought it'd been stolen, went running back to the train, it wasn't there. She goes, luckily, Andy, I got enough cash in my pocket to pay for the taxi, and I got to my hotel, which had been paid for by the company. So she now has the laborious task of actually ringing round all the banks to cancel her cards. Name, password, mother's maiden name, dog's inside leg measurement, all those sort of things. It was incredibly painful until I actually rang First Direct. Said, I had my purse stolen. Instead he goes, well, where are you now? Are you okay? Because I'm fine. And she told her the whole story. What are you doing? What's the story? Explained everything. And he took the details. She goes, well, I can get a card to you in the next 3 days, but that'll go to your home address in Leeds. No use to here in London. Can I just have a quick look? What I've actually had a look at, if you actually look, I've had a quick look on Google Maps. About 250 yards down the road from your hotel, an HSBC bank. If you tell me what you're wearing tomorrow, I'll give them a call. We need to do some security checks when you ring you, but I'll have £250 waiting for you if that's okay. She went, that's amazing, that's fantastic. She goes, I'm just doing my job. And I don't believe in the staff handbook. It says, this is what you have to do in the event of a customer being stranded at Hyde Park Corner. It's treat customers you want to be treated. It's built into what they do. That's their dramatic difference. And that to me is what this stuff is all about. And when you start looking at this, it's saying, what would that be equivalent in your business? How would your team react? And when we start looking at this, we can see businesses from a different perspective. This is how customers see it. You can be seen as being -1D, which is worse than your competitors in the areas that customers say important, or you're as good as or bad as, you're the same as. Management consultants were as bad as each other. Or you can be better than, that's 1D, doing things that just get you slightly ahead. But 9 times out of 10, if you start doing those things, people will catch up. So the challenge is 2D. Can we do things that are dramatically different, things our competitors aren't or can't do? And if we get everybody to buy into this, is it built into what we do? And that's the 3D bit, dramatically and demonstrably different, built into everything that we do. And it is this bundle of stuff. And so it could quite easily be the things that people say are the reasons that people buy from us. But it's an unmatchable bundle of products, services, skills, methods, and practices that differentiate your business from your competitors. And it's also worth pointing out, it's only any good if your customers want it, are prepared to pay for it. The best ones, I would argue, prepared to pay more for it and can recognise it, which is what this thinking in 3D is all about, is actually making sure that everybody understands their part in making it play and actually what they can do about it.
I love that model there, from -1D all the way up to 3D. I think it would be interesting for the brands listening in to think, okay, well, where actually would you place your brand? And then, you know, would that be different from where your customers would place you? Because they could be, you know, two completely different sections. So, but yeah, okay.
Absolutely. I often help people trying to remove their blind spots, and we carry out, or in the past, carry out client service questionnaires. You know, with an engineering business not far from us, and I went back to the MD and told him that the news wasn't good. His customers weren't happy with his quality, his service, delivery performance. And he sat there all sort of upset, and he goes, Andy, what's it about my competitors? I said, very similar, the scores are the same, not very good. He went, oh, that's all right then. So, well, yeah, we'll put on your new brochure, so-and-so, so-and-so engineering, only as rubbish as everybody else. Being as bad as actually argues easy to become better than. Just doing things that irritate or annoy customers.
Yeah, only as good as everyone else is not going to get you those sales, is it? All right, okay. Well, you know, so then, Andy, then how do then the brands become different and sort of stand out then? What do you say the areas to look at?
Okay. So we've sort of seen some sort of these sort of 5 ideas here, and they are just that. They're not sort of, please don't copy this and say, I can do that. Some sources of dramatic difference. I would encourage people to start thinking a bit about their business and, again, more importantly, their customers. And one of the ways of doing this is to solve problems. What are the problems and issues that your customers have? And again, this is about focusing particularly on specific maybe groups of customers. The examples I've got here aren't proof that everything can work for anybody. You've got to try and work out what this means for you. For example, you've heard of this dog TV. Dog TV is, guess what? A channel just for dogs. Started off in the States, where else? Where it's a subscription model, like $20 a month, right? They've got over 6 million subscribers. And all the TV programs and the sound and the music is geared specifically to dogs. And very often when I mention this, people in the audience who have got dogs are going, oh, I can see how this works. Others are going, what? And the good news is, it is now available in the UK. So you can try it, have a go. I had a client of mine had a go at it, and she said it's the best thing that's ever happened to her and her dogs. So it's right for some people. Another little problem, a bit of a quirky one. I do know I don't. If you change your mind, this is a website where you can sell your wedding ring, your engagement ring, if you don't need it anymore. Grimm & Co. is a very interesting charity here in South Yorkshire. And if you walked into their shop in the centre of Rotherham, you could buy Human Blood, Sweat and Tears, Goblin Mucus. Probably not something that you particularly want. If you're a 7-year-old and you're excited by this, it's a Harry Potter type world. It's an apothecary. It's amazing. And in it are secret tunnels that actually take you into some classrooms. Rotherham has one of the lowest levels of literacy in the UK. And this is a charity set up to actually engage and encourage kids to learn to read and write. And they do it by not sitting in classrooms, but actually encouraging them. They publish their books, they get them to read them. But you go into this little world that actually really gets people thinking, wow, this is fantastic. It's dramatically and demonstrably different. And I'd argue one of the best examples of something that solved the problem was Uber. And if you remember the day when you used to ring up a taxi and say, yes, it's on its way, and you weren't sure whether it was 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, you'd ring them again, oh yes, it's just coming around the corner. Uber suddenly went, here is a solution to that. You can see where your cab is coming from. The vehicles are the same, but it helps you actually see what's going on and builds confidence in them. So that, I would argue, is a great example of somebody solving a problem that helps create dramatic difference.
Yeah, that last one there, I think, just shows also the pace of change and the pace of also competitors keeping up, because back in the day, that would have been a 3D dramatic difference, you know, for Uber. But I suppose, like I said, you know, that you need to keep innovating, because now that is just a 0D. It's just as good as other taxi companies, because, you know, most taxi companies have this now, don't they?
Absolutely. So it's an ongoing, moving world. A second way, which I think I would argue is what maybe the Uber did at the time, is to break the rules, or not just break the rules, but set the rules. Do the things that you're not allowed to do in your world. And again, you see this in lots of different examples. "3D thinkers think out of the box," and they actually question challenge what we do. I think a wonderful example, and it sets the benchmark. And yes, they've invested millions in it. But the Nike head office store in New York, where they've got consultations where you can actually go in and talk through your issues, and they'll actually solve your problems and give you the right product. You can test them. There are basketball courts in there to actually test these things. Now, maybe nobody can do that, but whether we like it or not, some customers are going, if that's what Nike can do, why can't you? But they've broken the rules. Maybe not quite as dramatic, but quirky. When you start looking at Primark and how what they did, and you saw this earlier this year, they partnered with Greggs to actually create a dramatically demonstrably different range of clothing, which apparently sold out. So you could argue that's them knowing their customers. Scary stuff. But maybe in a non-retail world, or no longer retail world, Monzo Bank. I'd been to an event where one of the guys from Monzo was speaking. I thought, I've got to get one of these, it's amazing. So I downloaded the app and took a photograph of my driving license, my passport, sent it off, and they said, Andy, your card will be due in 5 working days. It actually arrived in 3, and it was there, bank sorted. And they dramatically, demonstrably broken the rules of banking. You don't go into branches. Some of the apps, they actually educate you where you've spent your money. Lots of following now. A client of mine, his 18-year-old son has got one of his apps on his phone. If he spends more than £100, Shirley Bassey starts singing "Hey Big Spender" to him. It's not going to change the world, but it's just geared to actually being dramatically and demonstrably different. This is one of my favourites, the Ralph Bending Estate Agency, just outside Glastonbury. They describe the properties in their adverts exactly as you would see them. And again, this isn't for everybody, but it's targeted to a group of customers who absolutely love it. So those are real descriptions of their properties. And the other one, just I think Amazon Fresh, I think is a great example of a you walk in, you have your phone on you, you get your crisps, you get your sandwich, you get your drink, and you just walk out again. And my 85-year-old father-in-law says they've been doing that in Rotherham for years. He can't quite see what the big deal is. But my point is that whether we like it or not, Amazon, even if we're not directly competing with them, are setting the standards that people go, if they can do that, why can't you? So they're breaking and setting the rules.
Yeah, and Amazon, you got to keep up with Amazon, haven't you? But I actually think out of all of those, I think it's Nike that are the brand that are doing this really, really well. So as you know, shown in your first example with them sort of like transforming their stores, you know, to really do a difference, because, you know, consumers don't use stores the same way as they did them before the pandemic. You know, they need to now be experience hubs. And obviously that's what you've shown that sort of Nike have done. And actually, you know, I'd also, you know, say to brands with stores, you know, don't just think about the flagship store as well. You know, look at driving those experiences down to, you know, your little towns and cities as well. You know, don't just concentrate on the flagship. And then, you know, quickly on the Monzo card, you know, saying it will arrive in 5 days but getting it in 3. It's just a simple way to delight customers, and I don't think brands do enough of that. You know, giving those customers those unexpected moments of delight, or just something they weren't expecting. You know, those small little things help.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that really leads us on to some of these other ones, which is about, when I start looking at this, is this whole idea of making things easy for people. Research again shows that people will happily spend more money if it's simpler. And it's our friends Amazon again, but the whole idea of Amazon Prime, people pay a premium for that. But what we think again, when we see lots of organizations, they put blockages and barriers up there. But I think again, Adidas, I like this one, they sort of show me. So basically you scan a shoe in the shop with an app, you put your size in, and then give you the shoe so you can try it on. Simple things of actually improving the customer experience. So you can see this one very quickly. This is how to park a car in China. It's all automated. You press a button and it takes it away and brings it back. Now, we're not in China, we're not doing car parking, but it's how do we actually make this stuff work for us. Virgin Media identified one of their challenges was that they often, coming to install broadband in people's houses and set it up, they'd book an appointment, sometimes quite in advance. When the technicians turned up, people weren't there. But very simply, they actually came up with a very, very simple SMS system that said, this time next week, we'll give you a date, your engineer will be with you. Any problems, give us a call. They'd send you one the day before. And they actually found that absenteeism from customers dropped down to about 8%. It saved the business a lot of money, but also improved customer satisfaction levels. Simple stuff, but again, making it easy for the customer.
Yeah, exactly. You said, you know, seamlessness is key there. I think what you were saying, and that Virgin example there, I know really also shows how you can, you know, achieve that through your communications by taking like a multi-channel approach. You know, people engage and interact with brands across devices now. So really, like I said, your marketing, but your customer experiences, you know, should do the same as well. So.
Absolutely. And then linked to that is this little one I talk about, show me, you know me, which is this whole idea of personalizing the customer experience. And again, different businesses do it in different ways. For example, have you any idea what Spotify and the Beehive pub in Harthill near Sheffield have in common?
No idea.
No, they both know me as a customer, and this is key, but they show it and they react to me. So, for example, Spotify know that I'm an aging rocker listening to stuff that some people have never ever heard of, but they give you an update of what sort of music you like. And what I also quite interesting, they do it once a year, but they send you these are things you tapped into, might want to revisit them. So again, that's quite a nice little service. I walk into the Beehive pub in Harthill, my local pub, and Emma, the landlady, knows I like a pint of red feather, and it's there for me straight away. One's using massive data, one's just using their perception of me as a customer. And that to me is what this stuff is all about. And again, the research suggests people want to be treated as people. I went to a client, when you start looking at this stuff, I went to a client, they were an engineering business down in Leicestershire, and I'd done some customer care training with them. I spoke at an event of theirs and gone to see them 6 months later. And I'd seen the MD, John, and I walked into the reception, and Andrea, the office junior, 17-year-old, said, hi Andy, how are you doing? I said, I'm great, thanks. She said, you had a good trip from Sheffield? You went from Sheffield, I thought it was good. I said, yeah, great, thanks. She goes, not within a couple of minutes, would you like a cup of coffee while you're waiting? I said, it'd be great. She goes, it's black, no sugar, isn't it? I said, how do you know that? She goes, it's my job to know. And she'd taken that on board and actually built a very simple little database of what her customers took for coffee and little details about them. Not going to change the world, its customers feel valued. Took my mum to see a financial advisor, car parking spot reserved for her. That to me is what this stuff is about personalising the customer experience, building it into every aspect of the customer journey.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's a really big one for me, you know, personalizing that experience. You know, I said I'm still really so surprised at how many brands don't use the customer data that they have, you know, but to their advantage to personalize what they, you know, can do for the customer. So, you know, you've just gone through there some really great examples in terms of, you know, the physical experience side of things. But actually with the right technology, it's so simple to personalize, you know, your marketing and your automation and sort of achieve that at scale, because, you know, like you said, people don't want to be treated just like, you know, they are a number. They get put off, you know, if you're sending the same generic, you know, email campaigns or campaigns to everyone, and especially it's even worse if they're a loyal or what you define as a VIP to you. So yeah, show me that you know me, you know, and I think for people to think about it in terms of how can they display that, whatever your responsibilities are at that brand that you're working for. I think, yeah, personalization is a big one.
Absolutely. I once had a business advisor come to see me from our local council, but an afternoon when he said he was going to produce a report on what he could do to help me. The email came through from him and said, "Dear sir or madam." It might have been the dress I was wearing at the time that confused me, I don't know, but my point is that we've got to personalise them. And I will just move on from that in terms of, do we ensure that everybody in our team is engaged, empowered and enabled to make it work? And again, there's some consultancy buzzwords in there. Empowerment is one we have to use in 2022. I go to any webinar that I don't use empowerment, get your money back. I had a client here in our neck of the woods who told me that it empowered his staff to delight his customers. It turns out 4 years ago, 2 of his buyers were in a Chamber of Commerce breakfast seminar for 20 minutes. That was it. And it's almost like you are now empowered. You've got to give people the training, the support and encouragement to do it. And it's basically what they're allowed to do. Timpsons, if you work at Timpsons, every member of staff at Timpsons is empowered to spend up to £500 to solve a customer's problem without talking to a manager. I think a great measure of empowerment is what can people spend without having to talk to somebody else. Apple give their staff very clear guidelines on how to approach their customers. They train and develop them to do it, but they also reward and recognise them for customer satisfaction levels, not for sales and profitability levels. I've discovered Ryanair do something similar. And people do actually explain to me, "Andy, how do you explain Ryanair's success?" And I think what Ryanair do is they lower your expectations so much. They deliver where they're going to within half an hour of it. Half an hour on and 50 miles of where you're going, you're delighted. What they could be like if they wanted to be, I'd argue Ryanair is a bit like Southwest Airlines, the airline in the States. They're a cheap and cheerful airline, but they believe their people are their dramatic difference. And they encourage them to do the announcements in any way they see fit. There's certain legal things they have to say. But here are some of the things that have been heard to say on their announcements. There may be 50 ways to leave your lover, only 4 ways off this plane. To enhance the appearance of your cabin flight crew with dimming the cabin lights. Your bags are available at Cow Selection. You don't find them, you're available in 2 to 3 weeks on eBay. And if you want to research this, and it is research, there's a fantastic video of one of their guys rapping the instructions. And I'm not suggesting that all your accounts department need to be able to rap. What I'm saying is, have they bought into what your dramatic difference is? Do they live it? The last little story of this, Timpsons is £500, Ritz-Carlton hotels, £2,000. Every member of staff is allowed, empowered, it's £2,000 to go the extra mile for a customer and sort their problems out. Great story of a guy called Chris Hearn staying in the Florida West Keys, Ritz-Carlton. Comes home with his family. He'll be told the tragic news by his 5-year-old son. He's left his best mate, Joshy the giraffe, back at the hotel. And he's got 5-year-olds, know the world has now come to an end. He's not going to bed, he's not going to have school in the morning. Chris told his son a bit of a white lie, said, "Joshy's having a couple of extra days holiday." I got him to bed. He was going to ring up his Carlton the next day to see if he could actually find anything, if he could find him. He didn't need to, he got a call that evening. "Excuse me, have you lost a giraffe?" "Yeah." "Oh, thank goodness, that's the laundry team here. We found him around this morning, been ringing around our customers all day to actually find out who he belongs to. He's on his way." Chris said, "I don't know if you could tell him, help me. That's also a little bit of a white lie. Is there any way you could take a picture of Joshy and show him on holiday, please?" "No problem." 2 days later, this package arrived with Joshy and some Ritz-Carlton goodies, and in it was a beautiful brown photo album with a picture of Joshy sunbathing, having a massage, driving down to the beach, chilling with his mates. And I'm not suggesting that people have to send pictures of their customers' furry toys to them. This whole idea of getting everybody to buy in, this whole idea of their dramatic difference.
Oh, it's a great example there, loving Joshy on his little holiday. Yeah, and I think my take on what you've just gone through there is, I think also like one of the things that people forget is actually about, you know, when you look at experience, is post-purchase experience. So, you know, your marketing and all these things can try and, you know, work hard on driving that sale, but then what happens after that, and how can you drive that difference after that? So whether that's pre-staying at a hotel or after they've left the hotel, whether that's waiting for their shoes to arrive, or whether that's the days after their delivery, or maybe it's, you know, the purchase of a coffee, or, you know, when they're on the plane after they bought their plane ticket. So I think, you know, brands need to really start to think end to end, don't they? And then some people can be sort of sidetracked by just thinking about a particular sort of part of the journey.
Absolutely. It's an example we need from a supplier of ours that did it for us, but if somebody pays us on time, it never fails to amaze me how many businesses have a letter that says, according to our records, you're 30 days overdue, 60 days overdue, 90 days overdue. How about as according to our records, you paid us on time? Could we just say thank you very much? We really appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly.
In the process.
Okay, so then we sort of looked at these then sources of dramatic difference, sort of, you know, as you called them. But then I suppose, yeah, I said, what are some of the actions that people can take to sort of figure out what theirs is then?
Okay, well, these are just ideas, and I'll stress again, they're ideas, but hopefully it's got people starting to think about these things. And idea one is to just, well, it seems obvious, but establish your dramatic difference. What is your bundle of stuff? And some things to think a bit about, and again, it doesn't have to be done on your own, get your team involved. But ask these questions. What are the problems we could solve? What are the things that we could actually do to sort of rules that we could actually break? And some questions. And I use these questions just to get a discussion going when I work with clients on this stuff. But these are not the only questions, but some I consider people sort of ask people just to sort of think about some of these things. But, you know, think about these questions. You know, what do we do that our competitors aren't doing? What do we do that competitors can't do? What are they doing that we're not? Not how can we copy them, but how can we maybe improve on that? Who else can we learn from? Not necessarily within our sector, but could we look in other worlds and see what they're up to? What should our bundle consist of? And a big one for me is, what do our customers want? And maybe again, the customers we want to work with, the customers we want us to, what do they want? But ultimately then it's what do we need to do? And then idea two is to, revolutionary stuff here, but give your best customers a damn good listening to. And again, just taking a step back, we talk about choose them or lose them. Choose them or lose them is actually focused on the right sort of customers. Who are the customers you want to buy from you? Who are those best customers? What does best look like for you? Have a think about it. The research again suggests that lots of companies don't actually know. But work out who these customers are and then maybe start finding out what they think and want. And one of the questions that I ask people is, you know, do you actually know what your customers want? And again, maybe there's a question for everybody else. Do you have a clear understanding of what your customers' needs and wants? I don't know if you want to maybe put the poll out there and see what people think.
Exactly, yep. So, you know, let's get that on screen for you. I think it's just should be loading for you now. So, yeah, as Andy was sort of saying, I think, you know, many of us marketers do feel like, you know, we kind of sometimes know what our customers want, but actually really. So let's kind of get this, you know, a thought for you all. So do you have a clear view of your customers' needs and wants? So hopefully that has appeared on screen for you. So you've got a few answers there. So no idea, slightly, fairly sure, quite confident, or absolutely. You know, what are your thoughts on, you know, in terms of at your brand, do you have a clear view of what your customers want? So we'll just give it a few moments. You know, a few of you are getting your votes in, which is great. I'll just give you another few seconds. You know, whatever comes to mind first, I think. So, all right, okay, I'll close that now then, and then hopefully let's try making sure that it launches and shares to you all this time. So can you see that, Andy, this time?
I can't see it, that might be. So what sort of things are people saying?
No, okay, I don't know why you can't see it. So we've got 33% at slightly, 22% are fairly sure, but the biggest one at 44% is actually quite confident. So that's interesting.
Brilliant, that's good, because that's the key thing for me ultimately. So it's the, again, it's the so what are we going to do with these things? And I think for me, it's actually establishing what they want and what they think. And again, typically, depends what questions people ask. I hear people say, oh, customers must be happy, Andy, because they don't complain. Well, again, the research suggests that lots of people aren't happy, still don't complain. I would even argue that the 3D businesses get more complaints because they ask for them. But here are some questions that you might want to consider. And again, I'm not suggesting you have to ask all these questions in a rotational way, but it's just some things just to get some conversations going. Why did you use us in the first place? Why did you choose us? Maybe it helps you identify your dramatic difference. Why do you use us now? When do you use us? And they come to you for something to go elsewhere that actually could actually be creating you're missing opportunities because they're using your competitors for other things. What one thing could we do differently? What one thing don't we do that irritates or annoys you? What is the one thing we should never stop doing? That might help you identify what they really value. What irritates or frustrates you about businesses like ours? Who can we learn from? If you could wave a magic wand, what one thing would you change about a business like ours? And please sum it up in just 3 words. And again, I'm not suggesting you have to ask all those questions, but just maybe put some of those questions out there and get the answers. I put a little toolkit together, which I know Rachel will send you some details of later, where it's got those questions in there. Think of your own questions, but ask those customers what they actually think and what they want. And then idea 3 is just to maybe create your own fresh pair of eyes, and I'd encourage you to stand in your own queues. And that actually means ring up your own business, go into your own store, go into your own shop, check out your own accounts department and see what it's like to be a customer of yours. Because everything that your business does right through the customer journey is one of 3 things. It positively reinforces your dramatic difference, it negatively detracts from it, or it's neutral, either is one thing or the other. Neutral things are okay, negative things we've got to get rid of, the positive ones, can we build them throughout the whole customer experience? And again, sometimes when you start looking at these things, some are a bit more obvious than others. And I'm not suggesting this particularly reinforces that brand particularly strongly. Not a very nice one, I know, but this whole idea of doing this, very simple example. A few years ago, I wanted to buy a DVD recorder. Money in my pocket to spend. I'd done the research, I knew what I wanted, went to a well-known electrical retailer on our high street, money in my pocket to spend. I walked in there, and I don't know about you, whenever I go into these stores, I always seem to get the Saturday morning. Whether it's Tuesday morning, Thursday afternoon, walked in, and on the left as I walked in was a rack with all these DVD recorders. But the price difference was amazing. And I'm looking at them, almost looking confused. This fresh-faced young lad came over to me, good afternoon, sir, how can I help you? Is this in their customer care manual? So I'm looking at these DVD recorders, but 750 quid, 100 quid, what's the difference between the two? He said about 650 quid. And then started reading the little red cards next to each of them. And I'm not having a go at him because he was trying his hardest. But here's what we call the sales prevention officer. Lots of businesses have them. It might not be the people, it could be the systems, the processes. It's revolutionary. It could be you. Ever done this? Somebody says to you, so promised to get back to a customer, not done it. I was once speaking at a conference up in Bradford, went on the website of a hotel, because I've not been there before, how to find us page. How to find us page was Barcelona. I don't know if you've been to Bradford or Barcelona, there are subtle differences. I actually arrived at the hotel and I said, this guy said, a good trip. So I said, yeah, but you need to know on your Google Maps, it's Barcelona. He goes, and there's a few told us that. He knew about it and still did nothing about it. So it's identifying these blockages, but then more importantly, getting rid of them, exterminating them. And I'll stress here, this is not about getting rid of the people. It's the systems, the processes, it's training them, it's developing them, helping them deliver and demonstrate your dramatic difference. And because it is about exceeding expectations, I've got a 4th idea, and it's this: do something. Take action, not notes. Have a go. Stand in your own queue. Talk to your team. Listen to your customers. Go and see what your competitors are up to. Work out what you're going to do. When we do these things, we often find people can divide into 3 groups. And there are those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, those that ask what happened. Vision without action is hallucination. About trying things, having a go. Maybe it's a bit scary. Working out what's not working, listening to your customers, and then more importantly, doing something about it. And doing things a bit scary. But I can get all these quotes from all these wonderful world leaders. The important one for me is this: don't just stand there, do something. Have a go. And this thing about understanding and knowing your customers, I was actually speaking at a conference up at the University of Newcastle, where 150 young entrepreneurs, all under 22. And I put this slide up, and they all just looked at me, and I realised they didn't know who Dick Dastardly was. The action I told them to take was to Google Stop the Pigeon and Wacky Races and watch some proper cartoons. And really, just to sort of finish this off, I'm sure you've heard this phrase: you always do what you've always done. People say you'll always get what you've always got. I think we're in a world where that's not the case anymore. You always do what you've always done, you get left behind. That's the challenge. Don't get left behind. In fact, don't just stay with your customers, with your competitors, get ahead of them. That's all about thinking in 3D.
Wow, that is a lot. And yeah, I think just going back to what we said at the very, very beginning, the speed of change now, so you'll get left behind very, very quickly if you aren't sort of innovating and thinking differently. So, well, thank you very much, Andy. An absolutely jam-packed session there. With, I said, lots of insights and examples to put into perspectives. So like I said, did say at the beginning, if you do have any questions, then feel free to pop them through. There is just one that we'll sort of go through now, but like I said, while we're answering that, if anybody's got anything else to ask Andy, then feel free to pop it in. Okay, so we have a question here. So breaking the rules, which we covered earlier, obviously is another way essentially of innovation. This guy's saying, so, and often it can cost money. So what if, at a brand you don't have the budgets, but also, quite interestingly, they put, and your customer base are sort of late adopters of tech or shopping trends. What would you say about that one?
I think honestly, if your customers are late adopters, you give them what they want, because the danger is that they actually then go to somebody else that will give it. I think you're right. For me, when I talk about innovation, we talk about the successful exploitation of new ideas. It's having a go at them. But you're right, it's got to be cost effective. I think the challenge is maybe trying to take that step back if you can and looking at that bigger picture. So first of all, the late adopters, how many of them are there? Are they, in polite, sort of dropping off and dying off? Are they still going to be there in the future? So do you need to adapt for the future? But it's also, what is the cost if you don't do the innovation? So yes, it costs money. Well, my experience, very often it's time and effort is what it's about. So yes, the Nikes of this world can invest millions, and I recognise that. But sometimes it's the little things. Where is the pain? Where are the problems of actually taking those things away? And I accept that totally. But that would be the thing for me. If those customers are quite happy with what you're doing and there are enough of them and it's sustainable for your business, keep after them, stick with them. Still no reason why you can't try and improve the experience with them on that, but do the things that they're looking for rather than things that maybe Nike are doing.
Exactly. I think it's that, that point where you were talking about customers, actually asking them, going through that. And like I said, it doesn't have to be the latest tech or innovation. Find out what your customers really want. And it could be the smallest enhancement on their, journey. Not quite sure what the business is, but yeah. Okay, well, there aren't any other questions that have come through. So what I'll sort of do is, sort of basically just summarise, I suppose, some of the key things, because like I said, there was a lot of great stuff that you covered there. So, some of the actions that I said people can take away is, establish your difference. So, as we've just said, find those gaps that your competitors don't have, and maybe, like I said, a problem that could needed to be solved. But I think this concept of, as we've just talked about, breaking the rules or pushing the boundaries is really interesting to think about. And I said, like, you had some great probing questions there that I think brands can start to think about. Secondly, as we've just said, customers, not only listening to them, but obviously, just like I said, finding, as I said earlier on, finding who the best ones are. So, I said you will have different segments of groups that engage with you, react with you, convert with you in different ways, and it's just really understanding them and sort of, like you said, nurture the right ones and the right ones that are going to drive that lifetime value for your brand. And then finally, I think it's such an obvious one that you covered just at the end there: stand in their shoes, go through the experience themselves, see it in the eyes of your customers, and you'll sort of pick up some of the areas that could be sort of blockers there. Well, I think that's it for today then. Like I said, there's been a lot to take in, so we will follow up with an email with actually the slides. Andy said you can obviously have the slides because there's a lot of you covered in there, and also there was a toolkit, I believe, Andy, that we're going to send out.
I put together a very simple web page with some resources that people can just access. They're there to just download and use and see how people want to just go away and do. And if anybody's got any other questions, just again drop me a line, let me know, and we'll do anything we can to help.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Andy, for taking the time today, and thank you everybody that's listening. We hope you found it useful and you can start to think a little bit more 3D at your brands.
Thank you very much. Keep safe, keep healthy, and keep thinking 3D.
All right, thanks then. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right, cheers, Rachel. Thank you.